What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Evil Punk here in ARMA 3, doing another helicopter guide. This time I'm going to be talking about advanced maneuvers. This will be relevant mostly to utility helicopters, but you can apply them to transport or heavy lift under certain circumstances. But again, this is going to apply mostly to utility helicopters. So without wasting any time, let's get into the first maneuver. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is sort of more of a concept than it is a maneuver, and immediately going back on my word, it's something you want to learn a little bit earlier on. So it may be a little more of a novice maneuver rather than advanced, but don't worry too much about it being a little bit of a lesser skilled maneuver. I'm still going to get into definitely more advanced maneuvers, but the first thing that I want to talk about is rapid deceleration. So there are two kinds of rapid deceleration. There's a lower speed rapid deceleration maneuver and a sort of high speed, sort of maximum speed rapid deceleration. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is a lower speed rapid deceleration. So I've just started slowing down so I can sort of demonstrate what a slower speed rapid deceleration is. So for the slower speed rapid deceleration maneuver, obviously you're not going to be at full speed when you're doing this. This is just sort of something you would do if you're just sort of cruising around not at full speed. So to do this maneuver, it's simple. You just pitch up, throw your throttle down. You have to pitch very exaggerated, so very high. So you can bring the nose up at an exaggerated rate and keep the throttle all the way down. But again, throttle control, you're going to want to be ready to compensate, because once all your airspeed's gone and your throttle is still down, you will start descending towards the ground. So again, demonstrating the slower speed rapid deceleration, you're going to nose up and throw your throttle all the way down. So again, exaggerated movements. You're going to nose very high up and then level out again. And once your airspeed's gone, be ready to bring that throttle back up to neutral position. And that's just a maneuver you would do to get into a more controlled approach speed. So if I was going to land here and I was at a little bit of a higher speed, I would use that rapid deceleration to get myself into a controlled approach speed like I've got right now. So I'm not going to actually land because I still want to demonstrate now the higher speed rapid deceleration, but let me one more time demonstrate the slower speed rapid deceleration. So this is a very exaggerated maneuver. So you're going to pitch back, put the nose up very high. So that's like 40 degrees right there. And then throttle back up and level out. So with that maneuver, sometimes you do gain a little bit of altitude. That's something you sort of want to avoid when you can, is gaining altitude. But if you do it properly, you should stay at about an even altitude, sort of where you started when you begin the maneuver. So if you do it properly, you shouldn't really gain or lose altitude. Well, you can descend. You can start your descend during that maneuver, but again, if you do it properly, you should at least not be gaining altitude. So the next maneuver that I want to demonstrate is the other type of rapid deceleration that you would do if you were up sort of to full speed. So this is the higher speed rapid deceleration maneuver. Sometimes it's referred to as J-turns or button hooks, or even just a hook maneuver. But it's also known again as the rapid deceleration. So if I wanted to come in this field over here, but I'm at full speed, you would just sort of bank at a 45-degree angle, drop your throttle, and pull back on your flight stick. And be ready again to compensate with your throttle. Because once all the airspeed's gone, again, you're just going to start descending towards the ground. And this, again, brings you to a controlled speed for a smoother approach. So there are a few different ways to sort of go about doing that maneuver. So paying attention to the roll indicator in our artificial horizon, to keep a level flight during that maneuver, you'd sort of go for about a 45-degree roll, and that sort of keeps the helicopter at a level flight. So again, paying attention to the artificial horizon, you're at about 45 degrees, and that's keeping the helicopter at a level flight. So the other way to do it, well, it's not really a way to do it, just something to be aware of. If you're less than 45 degrees, again, paying attention to the roll indicator. If you're less than 45 degrees, you start to gain altitude. You still slow down, but you gain altitude, as you see I've done just here. And I'll demonstrate again one more time, with this time more than 45 degrees. And in that case, I'll start to descend or lose altitude and go towards the ground. So just being aware of those two sort of factors. So I find 45 degrees to be the sweet spot to keep an even altitude without gaining or losing. So again, I'll do the maneuver with more than 45 degrees, and you'll see the helicopter starts heading towards the ground when you have a roll that is that exaggerated. So those are more just things to be aware of when you're doing that maneuver rather than concepts. Again, 45 degrees is sort of the sweet spot. So I'll demonstrate this one more time. I'll try to explain it a little bit better. So when you're up to speed, you will roll the helicopter either left or right, depending on... I like to roll towards the side the cockpit's on, so in this case I like to go to the left side. So you'll roll, drop your throttle, and pull your flight stick back. Other words, pitching up. And once all that speed's gone, again, just be aware that your helicopter will start to descend, so just be ready to bring your throttle back to neutral or sort of upwards. And that just gets you to a controlled speed, so you can come to a full hover that way, but I more use it to get down to a controlled speed so I can have a nice controlled approach to my LZ. So that about covers rapid deceleration. So with that being said, let's get into the advanced maneuvers now. So the first maneuver that I'm going to talk about and demonstrate is landing in confined spaces. So a confined space is an area that your maneuvering options are very limited. So looking at the container port over here, I wouldn't really consider that a confined space, rather just a tight LZ, because I do have options with this LZ. There are a few different approaches I can take here. So this is more of just a tight LZ. I do have a spot picked out that I want to use to demonstrate confined spaces. So let me just get over here to my demonstration area. So the first thing you want to do when you're landing in a confined space is sort of survey your LZ and decide your approach. And the way you do that is you look for the approach that has the lowest obstacles, not the lowest number of obstacles, rather the lowest in height, because a confined space is going to have obstacles on pretty well all sides. You just want to decide approach from the side that has the lowest height obstacles. You don't want to come in, so this is the space that I'm going to use right here in front of me. You don't want to do what is called an elevator landing, because if you come over the trees like this, I've got no visual on what's underneath me, of course, unless I were to go into third person, but keeping immersion, I'm staying in first person. But you don't want to do what's called an elevator landing and go straight over your LZ and then just go straight down. The reason you don't do that is because if you're noticing, I can't see really what's under me aside from that little blue house. So again, you want to avoid elevator landings, and I've mentioned this in the previous video. Some milsim units would have you ejected for even doing so. So it's really a good idea to learn how to land without doing the elevator landing. I mean, some circumstances you may have to do something like that, but very rarely would you ever. So again, you're gonna survey your LZ and decide which side has the lowest in height for obstacles, not the lowest number, the lowest in height. You want to give yourself as much visual on the LZ as possible. So you want to come in as low as you can to it, or as level with it as you can, and just give yourself the best chance of getting in without hitting anything. So I've clearly chosen this side because it's got the lowest obstacles, and I'm gonna come in, like I talked about in the last video, I'm coming in on a 45-degree angle. Well, more perpendicular for this one. This is more perpendicular, so the reason I'm doing that is because I can see out the windows quite clearly, rather than when I was above them, all I can see was dashboard and floor. So you're gonna, again, give yourself as much visual as you can on your confined space, and that's gonna give you the best chance of getting in without hitting anything. And you're going to want to be aware of the obstacles around you as well. So I know there's a house in there, there's a fence, and there's trees on every side except for the side that I'm coming in. So you want to be aware of where these obstacles are, and the reason for that is because you do have blind spots in the helicopter, and I'm going to sort of explain now how to get in without hitting anything. So again, give yourself as much visual as you can. And coming in, what you're going to want to do to avoid hitting your tail rotor or any blind side of the helicopter on anything, you're going to put yourself as close as you comfortably can to the obstacles that you can see. And that will help prevent you from hitting your blind side or your tail rotor on anything. So again, getting as close as you comfortably can to the obstacles that you can see. And that is going to help prevent you from hitting anything with your tail or your blind side. And just remember to be aware of the hazards that you past coming in, because with a confined space, it's more than likely you're going to have to get out the same way as the way you came in. And you can also, you would have to, in some cases, reverse out, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So again, just sort of reviewing all those points, you want to survey your LZ if it's confined space like this one. Pay attention to where the obstacles are, and you're going to approach from the side that has the lowest in height obstacles, not the lowest number, but the lowest in height. Of course, lowest number does help, but it's more important to come over the obstacles that are lower. And you're going to be aware of where the other hazards are. So, for example, the trees on the left, that little blue house beside the road, and the trees in front of the helicopter. And knowing that those hazards are there, I know that my tail rotor and my blind side are going to be close to obstructions that I don't want to hit. So again, to prevent myself from touching my tail on anything or hitting my blind side on something, I'm going to put myself as close as I can to the obstacles that I can see. So as close as I can without knowing that I'm still not going to hurt the helicopter. So again, demonstrating one more time, as close as I can, while still sort of a comfortable distance that I know I'm not going to hit the rotor or anything else on anything. And remember to pay attention to the way you came in, because it's a confined space. You're likely going to have to go out the same way. So that about covers confined spaces. So let's move on now to the next maneuver. So the next maneuver that I want to talk about now is pinnacles, or you may hear them referred to as toe-ins or pivotals, but we're going to talk about pinnacles now. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do a pinnacle. You can either do it into a hill, because there is no level ground to land on, or any level surface to put the helicopter down on. Or you can do it with buildings if you're trying to unload or load infantry from a rooftop. So let's start with the easier maneuver. This is still advanced, but this is a little bit easier than doing it with the buildings. So we're going to do a pinnacle on a hillside. And I'll use this hill over here by the tower. And you want to do this in a place where the incline is not so steep, so there is less chance of you hitting your rotor on anything. The steeper the hill, the more risk of your rotor getting hit on the hill itself. So if I could just find a place to get in here. Okay, so that hilltop was a little bit too tight for demonstration purposes, so I've come to this hill over here. This looks better. So again, when you're doing a pinnacle on a hill, you want to try to find a spot where the incline is not so steep, because the steeper the hill is, the more chance you may hit your rotor on it, and then, well, you're screwed then once your rotor is gone. So the way you want to do a pinnacle on the hill, and there are a couple of different ways to do a pinnacle. You can do a nose in, or you can do it sideways. So I'll demonstrate the nose way first. So you're going to come in at a controlled speed, and you're going to decrease your throttle very slightly so that your helicopter is descending. And you're going to plant your nose into the hill. And make sure your throttle is at least below neutral. And you're going to nose forward into the hill. You're really planting it into the hill, but you're doing this gently. And in third person, this is what a pinnacle looks like on the hill. So again, you're making sure your throttle is at least below neutral, but you don't want to bring it too far down, otherwise you're just going to start sliding down the hill. But you're going to have your throttle at neutral. Sorry, you're going to have your throttle lower than neutral, and you're going to really plant the nose into the hill and nose into it. So I'm pitched forward right now. My hand is on my flight stick and I'm holding it slightly forward, and this is keeping me planted in place. So with the throttle down, the helicopter is trying to descend, but because I'm nosed into the hill, it can't go down any further, so instead it's just staying planted in one spot. If you have your throttle at neutral or higher, you will start to drift around, and that is that makes everything difficult. And you run the risk of drifting into some trees, or maybe even running over your infantry as they're hopping out. So again, my throttle is slightly below neutral and I'm pitched slightly forward, and that's keeping the helicopter planted in place. Now the second way to do this It's a little bit trickier, but I know there are some milsim units that prefer it this way. Let me spin around here and I'll demonstrate this now, is coming in sideways. So you'll have your rear wheel planted, or your rear landing gear, and one side of your landing gear. And the easiest way to do this, again, is on the side the pilot is on, because you have the most visual. So just with the nose pinnacle, you're coming in at a nice controlled speed. And over time, you will get more efficient at this. But again, it's the same concept. It's just a little bit trickier because you're looking out your side window. So you're going to come in at a nice controlled speed. Once you touch the hill, you're going to lower your throttle a little bit, and you're going to really lean into the hill. So my hand's still on the flight stick. I'm leaning into the hill, and this is a lot trickier this way, but again, you can see the wheels are not on the ground, just that one wheel is. In some cases, you'll have the rear landing gear as well touching the hill. But again, that's a little bit trickier than the nose version. So I'm going to demonstrate the sideways version one more time. It's the same concept either way, just the only difference is you're using either your nose or one side of your landing gear. You could just also hover, but this gives you a more stable platform for troops to get in and out. So again, throttle down, lean into the hill gently. Once you touch the hill, make sure your throttle stays down a little bit and you're really leaning into the hill. This way is trickier to get now and again, but again, you'll get more efficient at it over time. Okay, so the next maneuver that I'm going to demonstrate, it's still a pinnacle, but you're using a rooftop rather than a hill. The concept sort of remains the same. It's just this maneuver is definitely a lot trickier. So the first thing that you want to do is you sort of want to get level with the rooftop that you're using and line yourself up with it. And again, you want to give yourself as much sight on it as you can. So once you're at least level with it, you can come in either parallel or sort of 45 as I've done here. You just want to give yourself the best chance of planting a wheel on the edge of the roof. And this is definitely a lot more tricky, so the concept remains the same. So I'm going to touch my wheel on the edge, and I'm going to lower my throttle only slightly below neutral, and I'm going to lean into the building, and that's going to prevent me from rolling off the edge of the building. So you're going to come in very slow, very controlled. Again, more practice, you'll get more efficient. And there you got to use reference points. So I know this little window below my left foot, it sort of lines up with my landing gear in the front, so one of the wheels below me. So I sort of use that to line myself up with the roof a little bit. So I know that once I can't see that ledge anymore, the wheel is at least over it. So you're gonna want to find yourself different reference points when you're doing complex maneuvers like this. So again, I know my wheel is not quite over that ledge yet because I can still see it in the little window on my left below my feet. But the concept remains the same. Just do it now, evil punk. Concept remains the same. You're gonna get your wheel down to the roof, and you're gonna lower your throttle and really lean into it. Otherwise, you're just gonna roll off the side and sort of plummet to the ground. So this takes quite a bit to remain stable. So again, my throttle is a little bit below neutral, and I'm really working the flight stick to keep this in place. So this is what this looks like in third person. I've got one wheel planted there, and you want to keep it lean towards the building, otherwise you're going to drift away from the building and sort of just start falling towards the ground. And you got to be really careful that when you go to plant the wheel on the edge, that the wheel is actually over the edge, otherwise you're just going to go straight towards the ground and catch your main rotor on the building, and that would be just game over for everybody involved. So again, a nice controlled approach you want to get yourself level with the building as you can. Sometimes it's a little difficult to judge, but do the best that you can. And you want this, it's really all in the prep work, so you want to get yourself level and line yourself up the best that you can. And find yourself some reference points. I'm using this window below the collective. So once you get that wheel down, you get to really lean into the building. And this is one that takes loads of practice. It's a little difficult to try to explain and do at the same time, but I'm trying my best here. So this is definitely one of the more advanced maneuvers that you'll do. So this is what it looks like. Oh, I lost it in third person. So again, it's a little hard to demonstrate and talk about at the same time. But that is the pinnacle maneuvers, both the hilltop and the rooftop pinnacles. So there's one last thing that I want to talk about for this advanced maneuvers guide. So let me find a position that I can explain that. So the last thing that I want to talk about in this video is reverse exits. So like I was mentioning earlier, sometimes you've got to come out the same way you're going in. So there may be some instances where you would do a reverse exit. So that would look a little bit something like this, keeping in mind what's behind you, and it's always better to go up rather than down, because the lower you get, the more risk you have of hitting something. But sometimes there's something in front of you, or it's the only way out. There's bad guys in front of you and you've got to pull out backwards, and it looks like that. So I'm going to demonstrate it again and sort of explain how it's done. You can also do this just taking off from the ground, so from a flat LZ or a flat surface where the bird is completely touched down on the ground. But you always got to be aware of what's around you when you're doing this, because this is an easy maneuver to make a mistake and hit something. So let's say that I've just lifted up from this LZ below us. There's bad guys in front. I've got to get out quickly. I don't want to waste any time spinning around like you normally would. So I'm going to just full throttle up, get speed going backwards, and the helicopter will start to turn on its own once it's going fast enough. So all I do is hit the rudder to help it out a little bit, and it spins right around 180 degrees on its own. So the helicopter started turning to its left on its own, so I just hit the left rudder and it spun the rest of the way by itself. So I'll demonstrate that again. I'll demonstrate what that looks like from a pinnacle, from a hill pinnacle. This is something that I used to do often in the Invade and Annex servers in Tanoa. So I used to do these hill pinnacles, and to get out, I would do a reverse exit. So this is nice and clear. I know there's nothing behind me because I've come in this way. I'm going to do my pinnacle, let everybody out. And then I've got to exit now, and I know there's maybe a Tigris or some AA in front of me, so I'm going to throttle up. And I'm going to make sure that I'm going up while I'm going backwards. So I'm going to be gaining altitude so that I know that I'm going to clear any obstructions that may be behind me. And again, the helicopter, once you've hit a high enough speed, the helicopter will start to turn on its own, and you can just hit the rudder in the direction that it's turning to help flip it around the rest of the way. Or you can do it before you're up to speed. Either way, the helicopter will flip around 180 degrees easy, no problem. So that's what a reverse exit looks like. And now that's all that I really wanted to go over for this video. I will be going over more for other helicopters as well. This one again was most relevant to the utility helicopters, but can be applied to pretty well any helicopter that you're flying. So again, I hope this helps you guys out, and I do like to have feedback, so you definitely leave a comment whether this helped you. Maybe there's something that I missed or you had trouble understanding, like I didn't explain it in a way that's easy to understand. So feel free to ask questions, make suggestions. What helicopter do you need help with? What sort of area do you want maybe some advice in? So leave any of those comments, and also feel free to leave a like and subscribe.